A billionaire gave a rodeo bull to a poor boy, intending only to mock him. But then, something truly unexpected changed everything. What happens next will leave you speechless. The crate dropped with a metallic thud. Everyone flinched, the sound slicing through the warm afternoon like a snapped bone. Dust floated in the air as the convoy of black trucks idled behind the rodeo ring, their engines still rumbling low like beasts waiting to be fed. 13-year-old Colton Briggs stood frozen at the edge of the commotion, his boots half sunk into the dry, cracked earth. His pulse thudded in his ears. Vaughn Redcliffe's voice boomed across the crowd, smug and deliberate. "Since the boy's so eager to ride," he said, clapping a heavy hand on Colton's shoulder, "let's give him a real shot at greatness." The billionaire's words drew a mix of chuckles and gasps from the dozen ranchers, riders, and festival-goers gathered nearby. They stood in a semicircle under the glaring sun, eyes narrowed, hands shading brows, unsure whether this was a performance or something more twisted. Colton blinked, his mouth dry as the side of the crate groaned open. Inside stood a massive black bull, muscles coiled beneath a hide scratched with deep scars. Its breath puffed out like steam. One eye was clouded with a milky film, the other sharp and glassy, locked onto the world like it didn't trust a soul in it. Fulgur. The name rippled through the crowd in hushed recognition. One of the men, lean, gray-haired, with a stitched rodeo patch on his vest, spat quietly and muttered, "That bull near-gutted Mikey Durant last season." A nervous laugh escaped someone behind Colton. Vaughn smiled wider, motioning to his assistant, a square-jawed man in a pressed shirt who held a clipboard and a leash that he made no move to attach. "Gifted to young Mr. Briggs on behalf of Redcliffe Livestock," Vaughn said, extending his arms like a magician revealing the finale. "Let's see how far dreams take you, kid." Colton's throat tightened. For a second he thought of running, back to the fence, back to his father, back to the simpler safety of small dreams. But the second passed. He didn't move. Instead, he stepped forward. The crowd quieted. Fulgur didn't blink. The two stared at each other, boy and bull, neither flinching, neither yielding. The moment held, stretching longer than it should have. Then the bull huffed, backed a half-step into the crate's shadows, and lowered his head slightly. Not in submission, but maybe in something less hostile. That was all Colton needed. "I'll take him," Colton said quietly. The silence broke into scattered murmurs. Vaughn raised an eyebrow, clearly expecting hesitation, but Colton's tone didn't waver. Behind him, Wade Briggs pushed through the crowd, his weathered hands balled into fists, his face dark with worry. "Colton," Wade hissed, grabbing his son's arm, "we don't have the land, the time, or the money. And that's not just any bull. That's a killer." "He's not a killer," Colton replied, eyes still fixed on Fulgur. "He's just angry." Wade opened his mouth to argue, but something in his son's expression stopped him. That same stubborn look his wife used to wear when she planted flowers in rock-hard soil, swearing they'd bloom anyway. "I'll help build the pen," Wade muttered, rubbing a hand over his face. "But if he charges, we sell him. No questions. No delays." Colton nodded. He didn't look away from the bull. That night, long after the trucks rolled out and the sun fell behind the hills, Colton and Wade were still working. By flashlight and lantern, they assembled a makeshift enclosure from salvaged barn gates, rusted fencing, and spare beams a neighbor let them borrow. It wasn't perfect, but it would hold, hopefully. Fulgur stood still inside it, watching them. He hadn't eaten since the drop-off. He hadn't laid down, just watched. Wade tossed a tarp over the last panel and wiped his brow. "You've gone and done it now, Colton," he said. "You sure he ain't planning to run through that fence come morning?" "I don't know," Colton admitted, stepping closer with a feed bucket. "But I think he's waiting to see if we're going to treat him the same way they did." He placed the bucket inside the fence. Fulgur didn't move. Later, after Wade turned in, Colton sat alone near the pen, knees pulled to his chest, a flashlight resting between his boots. Coyotes howled in the distance. The wind kicked up dust that scratched across his cheeks. But he didn't leave. He watched Fulgur for hours, watched the way the bull's ears twitched at every sound, how his breath stayed deep and even, never panicked, never aggressive. His muscles, still tense, never flinched. But there was no lunge, no snort, no charge. Just watching. "You don't trust me yet," Colton whispered, "but I'm not going to hurt you." Fulgur blinked once. Colton leaned against the pen post and let the flashlight dim. "You were built for show, weren't you? All that anger just to make people cheer when someone falls." He shook his head, voice soft. "You don't have to be that anymore." The bull shifted slightly, his massive hooves crunching gravel. Colton didn't move. The next morning, Colton was up before the sun. He didn't go inside for breakfast, didn't grab his school bag. He just went straight to the pen. Folger was still standing, but something was different. The bucket was empty. A step forward, another. Still no charge. That day at school, the whispers began. Kids talked about the gift Vaughn Redcliffe left behind. A couple of them made jokes about Colton the Clown getting squashed. One boy, Kenny Rusk, laughed loudest. "He gonna ride that thing to school next?" Kenny scoffed, throwing a wadded paper ball at Colton's back. "Or is he training it to be his best man?" Colton didn't respond. He didn't look back. Because something had shifted, not just in the bull, but in him. He felt taller somehow, sharper. After school, he rushed back to the pen. Folger watched him. This time, Colton stepped inside. Wade saw from the porch and sprinted toward the fence, heart pounding. "Colton, get out of there now!" Colton raised a hand. "He's not moving." Indeed, Folger stood still. His breath came steady. Colton walked to the middle of the pen and sat down in the dirt. No sudden moves, just calm. An hour passed, then 2. Wade eventually stopped pacing. He leaned on the fence, arms crossed, eyes wide but silent. He didn't understand it, couldn't, but there was something happening here. That evening, Vaughn Redcliffe sat with a drink in hand on the top floor of the Dry Hill Grand Hotel, reviewing the footage his cameraman had sent back. A still shot of Colton, sitting in the dirt, inches from Folger. Calm, confident, unharmed. Vaughn chuckled. "Well," he said, swirling the ice in his glass, "this just got more interesting." Back at the trailer, Wade crouched by the pen and stared at the boy who refused to budge. "Why him, Colton?" he asked quietly. "Why this bull?" Colton looked at Folger, who was now lying down for the first time. Not relaxed, but not ready to fight either. "Because he's broken," Colton answered softly. "And I think he knows I am too." Wade didn't know what to say. That night, as the wind picked up again and the coyotes howled louder than before, Colton stayed beside the pen, wrapped in a blanket, eyes heavy but determined. Folger, barely 10 feet away, closed his one good eye. Colton whispered into the dark, his voice carried gently by the breeze. He didn't move, but he didn't charge either. Something had begun, and neither the boy nor the beast knew what it would become. The first time Folger slammed his horns against the fence, it nearly tore the gate off. Colton stumbled back, breath caught in his throat, dust flying up around his boots. The bull bellowed, thrashing again, harder this time, his hooves carving trenches into the dry earth. The metal frame of the pen groaned under the pressure. Wade sprinted from the shed, hammer still in hand, shouting, "Get back! He'll kill you!" "I'm fine!" Colton shouted, though his hands trembled as he dusted himself off. His left knee ached where he'd landed on a stray stone, but he refused to limp. Not in front of Folger. Not now. The pen settled. Folger stood motionless, sides heaving, nostrils flared. His dark eye locked onto Colton, wild and unreadable. That was the 3rd time that week. Each day was a battle, not just with the bull, but with doubt, fear, and the voices piling up around town. Men at the feed store shook their heads when Colton walked in. Some muttered warnings under their breath. Others weren't as quiet. "He'll get that boy killed," said one. "That bull ain't meant for a backyard pen." A local rancher called Wade directly, offering to buy the bull before something tragic happens. Wade thanked him but hung up quickly, jaw tight. The tension in their tiny trailer grew thicker by the day. Still, Colton refused to back down. Every morning before school, he sat by the fence and waited. Sometimes Folger paced. Sometimes he stood still. But every now and then, just for a moment, he would stop moving entirely and stare at Colton, like he was listening. That flicker of understanding kept Colton going. On the 5th morning, Colton tried to hand-feed him. Folger snorted, spun, and kicked up a wall of dirt that nearly blinded him. By that evening, Wade had had enough. He slammed a notice onto the kitchen table, a printed letter from the sheriff's office with an official seal. "You see this?" he said, his voice low but tense. "We've got 7 days, Colton. 7. Either that bull's gone, or we're paying a fine that'll bury us." Colton read the letter, jaw tight. "They can't just—" "They can. Town ordinance. Dangerous livestock within a mile of public space." Wade rubbed his temples. "You know Mrs. Callister? She filed the complaint. Said her son can't sleep knowing there's a killer bull less than 3 blocks away." Colton pushed away from the table. "He's not a killer." "I know you believe that," Wade said, trying to stay calm. "But belief won't keep us from getting evicted." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Wade exhaled and said, "I'll call the auction house in the morning." "No," Colton snapped. "Give me a week. I can prove he's worth keeping." Wade leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "How?" Colton hesitated. "I'll enter the rodeo qualifier next Saturday. If I can stay on a bull, even just once, someone might take me seriously. Might help us keep him." Wade stared. You've never ridden before. I've watched enough. Practiced with barrels, ropes, anything I could find. That's not the same. No, it's not. But it's what I've got. The next day, the town bulletin board outside the diner held a new announcement. The Dry Hill Amateur Rodeo Qualifier was open to first-time riders. One winner would earn a chance to compete in the regional circuit. The crowd would be large. Sponsors, reporters, scouts. A perfect stage. Vaughn Redcliffe saw the notice too. From the corner window of his luxury suite atop the Dry Hill Grand Hotel, he read the flyer with a grin. A quiet chuckle slipped through his teeth as he turned to his assistant, Kellen, who stood nearby. "Make sure the boy's invited," Vaughn said, "and let's sweeten the deal." Later that evening, a public statement was issued from Vaughn's PR team. Redcliffe Livestock will donate $50,000 to the Rodeo School of Colton Briggs's choice if the boy can stay on any bull for 8 full seconds. It was bait. Colton knew it. Everyone did. But he accepted the challenge anyway. What no one outside Vaughn's circle knew was that the Redcliffe team quietly submitted a new name to the event roster, Folger. The same bull Colton had been training with, fighting with, believing in. Vaughn's private plan was simple: humiliate the boy, publicly and permanently. If the bull bucked Colton off in front of a cheering crowd, it would be the final punchline to a story that had started as a joke. Whispers spread fast. Some locals admired Colton's nerve. Others shook their heads. "He's gonna get stomped. I heard Vaughn's putting that bull in the ring. Boy's got guts, but no chance." Amid the storm, one man approached the Briggs trailer late one evening. He was tall, with sun-creased skin and a limp that told of old injuries. He carried no hat, just a worn satchel slung over one shoulder. He tapped twice on the wooden porch. Colton answered. "You're Colton Briggs," the man said. "I am. Name's Dale Mercer. Used to train bulls. Used to work with the Redcliffe stock before they got greedy. I knew Folger's sire. Good bull. Got ruined by bad hands." Colton squinted. "Why are you here?" "Because if you're going to do what I think you're going to do, you'll need more than hope." That night, under the flickering porch light, Dale laid out the basics of bull psychology. He spoke in quiet tones, patient but firm. Not tricks, understanding, eye contact, breathing patterns, ground posture. Dale watched the way Folger moved when Colton approached and nodded slowly. "He's not wild anymore," Dale said. "He's waiting." "For what?" "For someone to stop treating him like a monster." Over the next few days, they trained in secret. Colton skipped lunch to stretch his balance, practiced with makeshift ropes tied around hay bales. Dale taught him how to control panic, how to feel the shift in a bull's body a second before it bucked. Wade was cautious but didn't stop them. Each night, Colton entered the pen and stood closer than the night before. By Thursday, he touched Folger's shoulder. By Friday, Folger didn't flinch. The morning of the qualifier arrived beneath heavy clouds. The rodeo arena was louder than Colton had ever heard it. Vendors barked prices. Riders paced nervously. Speakers blared classic country songs between announcer roars. In the holding pen, Colton stood with the roster in his hand. He ran his finger down the list and stopped. Folger, entry number 16. His heart paused. "Problem?" Dale asked, stepping beside him. "No," Colton said, folding the paper. "Not anymore." Across the arena, Vaughn Redcliffe took his seat, a pair of sunglasses perched on his nose despite the overcast sky. Kellen handed him a pair of binoculars. Vaughn didn't use them. He simply leaned back and smiled. "Let's see if the boy bleeds." Back behind the chute, Colton placed a hand on Folger's thick hide. The bull snorted once but stayed calm, steady. "Just you and me now," Colton whispered. "Let's show him." And when the gate finally opened and the world erupted in cheers and dust, what happened in that arena would silence the whole town. Colton climbed onto Folger's back, his jaw tight, knuckles clenched around the rope. The air around the arena thickened with anticipation. Dust floated in lazy spirals under the overhead lights, but everything else felt sharp, too sharp. The crowd murmured, some cheering softly, others whispering in disbelief that this boy, the ranch hand who'd arrived on foot just weeks ago, was now atop the fiercest bull in Redcliffe's lineup. Wade sat near the edge of the ring, hands gripping the worn wood rail so hard his fingers looked drained of blood. His breath came shallow. Dale stood just behind him, arms crossed, his jaw working slowly as if trying to chew through years of buried regret. The gate slammed open. Folger exploded from the chute like a missile, hind legs kicking skyward, twisting his body violently in midair. Colton lurched but didn't fall. He kept low, body pressed to the bull's spine, his free hand slicing the air in careful rhythm. The crowd roared at the sheer violence of the first 3 seconds. Then suddenly, Folger paused. Mid-buck, his body stilled just long enough to make everyone watching lean forward. It wasn't exhaustion. It wasn't confusion. It looked intentional. Colton adjusted his weight instinctively. He could feel it, something in Fulgur shifting. Not the wild anger of a tortured beast, but the focus of a mind that had been trained, no, forced, to perform. Colton's heart hammered, but he didn't let fear twist him. He matched every jolt with precision, every twist with instinct. His teeth gritted, shoulders low. He wasn't riding just to stay on. He was riding to understand. At the 5-second mark, it changed again. Fulgur's movements sharpened, but they weren't erratic. His hooves struck the dirt in perfect, unnatural timing, like a sequence practiced too many times. The crowd's cheers began to die down into confused silence. This didn't look like the raw power of a wild bull. It looked like choreography. By the 7th second, Colton could feel the tension in Fulgur's spine change again, as though the bull recognized him, not as a threat, but as someone who didn't belong in the ring of cruelty. Colton's jaw trembled, not from fear, but from the realization creeping through him. Fulgur wasn't just trained, he'd been broken and reassembled. The buzzer rang. Colton let go. He slid from the bull's back, legs buckling as his boots hit the dirt. He stumbled, caught himself, then raised one trembling hand. For a heartbeat, the arena was dead silent. Then the crowd erupted into chaos. Cheers, gasps, camera flashes blinding from every angle. People surged toward the rails. Announcers shouted over the intercom, struggling to describe what they'd just seen. But Colton ignored all of it. He dropped to one knee beside Fulgur, who had come to a full, unsettlingly calm stop in the center of the ring. The bull didn't snort or kick. He simply stood there, muscles twitching beneath his skin. Colton leaned in close, his palm on the bull's flank. "You don't owe them another second," he whispered, voice trembling. Fulgur snorted softly, and Colton backed away just as handlers cautiously approached. One wrong move and the moment could shatter, but Fulgur didn't flinch. Behind the fence, Wade exhaled slowly, his shoulders sagging. Dale's eyes were wide, not with pride, but with fear. Fear that the truth was clawing its way into the open. Within hours, footage of the ride was everywhere. Rodeo forums, news channels, animal rights pages. But it wasn't just about a poor kid lasting 8 seconds on Redcliffe's worst bull. It was what Fulgur didn't do. Clips slowed down frame by frame. Analysts paused at the 3-second mark. "This is deliberate," one animal behaviorist explained in an interview. "Look here, he resets. That's not instinct. That's training." Online theories flared. Had the bulls been conditioned to perform these violent movements on cue? Were they even aggressive by nature, or had someone taught them to be? That night, Colton sat outside the bunkhouse, watching the fire in the barrel crackle and spit. Wade joined him quietly, hands tucked in his jacket pockets. "You all right?" Wade asked, lowering himself onto an overturned crate. Colton didn't answer immediately. He stared into the flames. "He wasn't trying to hurt me, Wade. Not even at the start. You think he knew you were different?" "I think he knew I wasn't them." Wade nodded slowly. "You're not." The next morning, chaos hit. An anonymous whistleblower posted grainy, covert footage of bulls in dark pens, flinching from electric prods and being pumped with injections before rides. Several animals had sores along their flanks, marks that matched what behaviorists now believed were pain response zones, a way to make them buck harder when triggered. Redcliffe's name was plastered across national headlines. "Cruelty in the arena," one article blared. "Corporate rodeo and the price of pain," another read. Vaughn issued a statement calling Colton's ride a fluke and the whistleblower a bitter ex-employee, but it only made things worse. Investigators moved in. Rodeo boards issued suspensions. Sponsors pulled funding. And Vaughn, tight-lipped and furious, stepped down from several high-profile committees. Dale watched the press unravel with a quiet satisfaction. One evening, as Colton helped unload hay bales, he walked over and handed him a folded letter. "I wrote this 5 years ago. Sent it to Vaughn and the board. Told them what was going on with the bulls, the forced sedations, the injury cover-ups. They didn't like it." Colton opened the letter. Typed paragraphs, signatures, a red stamp across the top, blacklisted. "They buried it." Colton looked up. "Why are you showing me now?" Dale shrugged, though his voice cracked when he answered. "Because it took a kid to finish what I couldn't. But not everything could be fixed with headlines and backlash." Fulgur's future was uncertain. With Redcliffe under investigation, all their bulls were seized, evaluated, and many were marked for reassignment to sanctuaries. Colton was offered a chance to keep Fulgur, technically as a guardian, not an owner, but doing so meant more legal paperwork, more visibility, and potential retaliation from whatever remained of Redcliffe's supporters. "Could lose the ranch if they drag us through court," Wade told him one night. They still have lawyers, still have money. I don't care about that, Colton replied. But the truth was, he did. Not for himself, but for Wade, for the horses, for the land that had finally felt like home. He spent that night outside the paddock, sitting on the fence as stars blinked above him. Fulgur stood quietly in the pasture, ears flicking as if listening. Colton leaned forward. They broke you so you'd break others, he whispered. And you still chose to hold back. You've earned your peace. He sat there until the first light of dawn crept across the hills. By morning, the paperwork was filed. A transport team would arrive at noon to take Fulgur to a sanctuary across the state, one that specialized in rehabilitating abused animals. Colton watched the truck arrive, watched the handlers approach with soft voices and slow movements. Fulgur stepped into the trailer without protest, but turned once, locking eyes with the boy who had seen through everything. Colton gave a small nod. You'll be safe now, he murmured. The door shut. The engine roared to life. Wade joined him at the gate. You sure? No, Colton admitted, voice rough. But it's not about what I want. They stood in silence, the dust settling, the morning sun stretching long shadows across the empty arena. And as the trailer disappeared over the hill, the chapter behind them closed, not with vengeance, but with quiet truth. That night, under a star-choked sky, Colton made his choice. 3 months later, Fulgur stood under the open sky, his massive form calm, eyes soft as he chewed slowly in a field of tall grass. A wind swept across the hills of Wildhorn Preserve, a quiet sanctuary nestled between the wooded rise of Thornridge Valley and the golden sprawl of Westmere pastureland. He didn't wear the scars of the arena anymore, not visibly. The once violent tremors that would twitch along his muscles whenever he heard loud noises had faded. Now, when thunder cracked, he lifted his head and stood still. That was the measure of peace. Colton sat on the other side of the fence, elbows resting on the lowest wooden rail, his cowboy hat tilted slightly forward to shield his eyes from the late afternoon sun. He wasn't there to train, wasn't there to perform. He just sat. Fulgur glanced at him once, then went back to grazing, and that was enough. No tricks, no commands. Just the soft kind of silence that felt earned. Wade's truck kicked up dust on the far road, slowing before parking under the shade of a crooked pine tree. He stepped out in his mud-caked boots and work-stained flannel, a deep yawn escaping as he stretched his back. You been sitting here all morning? Wade asked, walking up beside him. Since before sunrise, Colton murmured, not looking away from the pasture. You're gonna catch pneumonia talking to bulls before breakfast. Colton finally cracked a smile, small and tired. He listens better than most people. Wade let out a low chuckle and slapped him on the back. That he does. The past months had reshaped both of them. Wade, once stuck between loyalty and fear, had taken a job at the neighboring Cranley Ranch, where the foreman was known for straight shooting and clean hands. Colton, on the other hand, had been offered something unexpected. Dale, or rather Dale Carringer, a rodeo legend turned animal welfare advocate, had put in a call. Not to make Colton a writer. That dream had shifted. But to bring him in as a junior behavior apprentice, a student of movement, instinct, and care. You sure you want to take it? Dale had asked the day the offer came. Colton hadn't hesitated. I don't want to ride him anymore. I want to understand him. Dale had nodded with pride. Then you're going to do just fine, kid. Real fine. Back at the Wildhorn Preserve, the world had kept moving. After the footage of Vaughn's stunt spread, donations poured in, some anonymous, some loud and angry. Journalists called it the mockery bull case, but it became something deeper. An internal audit into Redcliffe Livestock revealed forged veterinary files, steroid enhancements, and even silenced reports from former staff about abuse toward injured animals. A federal investigation followed. Vaughn Rusk paid millions in settlements. Redcliffe was seized, shuttered, and its name stripped from the Rodeo Federation's registry. Vaughn himself disappeared from public life. No press conference, no apology, just silence. But for Colton, justice wasn't in courtrooms or headlines. It was here, every week, when he saw Fulgur step freely into open air. Some part of him still didn't believe it. How a cruel joke had spun into all this. The same bull meant to humiliate him had become the face of change. One afternoon, Dale leaned against the barn wall, arms crossed, watching Colton guide a young handler through a mock training drill. You've got a touch most folks don't, he said when the session ended. Colton raised a brow. That a compliment or a warning? Dale grinned. Bit of both. People like you? They don't stay unknown for long. Colton shook his head. I don't want the spotlight. Doesn't matter, Dale replied. You're in it whether you want to be or not. That truth hit again during the charity rodeo 3 towns over. Colton had only come to help organize livestock transport and safety checks. But halfway through the event, the announcer's voice crackled over the loudspeaker, calling for him to speak. He shook his head instantly. A volunteer jogged up. "They just want you to say a few words. About the bull, about the case, about what it meant." Colton glanced at the arena. Crowds sat where once he might have dreamed of performing, but his stage was different now. "I don't have words," he said quietly. "Not like that." Still, he walked to the nearby booth, pulled out his phone, and scrolled to a photo. It was from a week ago, Fulgur standing in a meadow of yellow blossoms, a bluebird perched fearlessly on his horn. He sent it to the announcer. That night, instead of a speech, a single image was projected on the screen at center field. Beneath it were only 7 words. "He was never a monster, just misunderstood." The crowd went silent. Then came the applause, not loud, but sincere. Not for a win, but for a truth long buried under dust and noise. Later, sitting in the back of Dale's pickup with the windows down and the evening air thick with the scent of hay and hope, Colton leaned his head back. "You think this'll last?" he asked. "What, the praise?" Dale said. "Number the change." Dale took a moment before answering. "If you keep showing up, yeah, it will." Colton didn't say anything more that night. He didn't need to. In the weeks that followed, he turned down every interview, every sponsorship request, every television pitch that wanted to dramatize his journey. He wasn't interested in retelling the pain. He wanted to build from it. He returned to Wildhorn twice a week, training volunteers, giving talks to young ranchers about animal respect and behavioral signs. Slowly, the narrative shifted. Kids stopped seeing bulls as monsters. They started listening. Wade helped out too when he could, offering his truck, his strength, his stories. He had changed, though he'd never admit it outright. Pride no longer made him stubborn. It made him protective. And Fulgur? He became a symbol without ever knowing it. No longer chained, no longer labeled. Just a creature of weight, history, and grace. On one visit, Colton stood alone by the fence, the horizon burning orange and pink. A young boy approached shyly behind him. "Are you the bull whisperer?" Colton turned. "Some folks say that, but I don't whisper. I just listen." "Why?" the boy asked. Colton's answer came easy. "Because someone needs to." The boy smiled and ran back to his father. And Colton stood there a little longer, boots planted, breath slow, feeling the land settle around him. People often asked him later what it felt like, to stand up to Von Rusk, to take on a billionaire and win. He never answered with big words, just a quiet shrug and a half smile. "I didn't want to win," he once told a reporter. "I just wanted to be heard." Months later, at a charity rodeo, Colton was invited to speak. He declined the spotlight but agreed to share one thing, a photo of Fulgur grazing peacefully, captioned only with the words, "He was never a monster, just misunderstood." And though the boy no longer rode bulls, he taught others how to listen to them. The joke had backfired. What began as mockery became a movement, and a poor boy with a dream left behind something far greater than a ride. He left behind a legacy. Disclaimer: the story you just watched is fictional. It explores themes of social class, unexpected connections, and the transformative power of empathy and resilience in the face of prejudice. This narrative aims to inspire hope, challenge assumptions, and highlight the unforeseen ways lives can intertwine.